In the quiet stillness of a darkened world, a voice pierced through the void, "Let there be light." And with those words, the great tapestry of creation began. The heavens unfurled their stars, the seas gathered their waves, and the earth adorned itself in lush greenery, alive with the fragrance of purpose. Each detail spoke of intentionality, a divine symphony composed by the Creator's infinite wisdom. And God saw that it was good, not just in function, but in the beauty of His design. An echo of His perfect love. This story, the cornerstone of the book of Genesis, is more than an account of beginnings. It is a proclamation of hope, a declaration that out of chaos, order can emerge, from emptiness, life can bloom. It reminds us that we are not abandoned to the randomness of existence but are instead intricately woven into the Creator's grand plan. At the heart of this narrative lies the beginning of faith, love, and an eternal relationship between God and humanity, a relationship marked by trust in His unfailing promises. Genesis does not merely chronicle creation, it reveals the profound truths that shape our journey. It speaks to the purpose infused into every life, the resilience born from trusting God in the face of trials, and the assurance that His plans are sovereign and good. Like the heavens, we are called to shine His light, like the seas, to move with His purpose, and like the earth, to bring forth life and bear fruit. Through the grandeur of creation and the intimacy of God's communion with man, we are reminded, the same God who spoke light into the darkness is still at work in our lives today. His love is unchanging, His promises unshakable. In every new beginning, we find an invitation to walk by faith, to trust the artist of the universe, and to discover the beauty of His eternal plan. The beauty of Genesis lies in its profound revelation of God's character as both an artist and a master planner. In just 6 days, the formless void was transformed into a masterpiece of balance and harmony. Every star twinkling in the vast expanse, every tree rooted in fertile soil, and every creature moving with purpose bore the unmistakable signature of divine perfection. Nothing was accidental, each element was intricately designed, reflecting the Creator's boundless creativity and infinite wisdom. This awe-inspiring account is more than a chronicle of the universe's birth, it is a testament to God's precision and intentionality, not only in the cosmos but also in our lives. When we encounter moments of chaos, when our plans unravel, our paths seem uncertain, and the weight of confusion presses heavily, Genesis offers a resounding truth: the same Creator who commanded the galaxies into being is still working. He is crafting something extraordinary out of what seems formless in our lives. Like a potter shaping clay, God's hands are never idle. He is molding our brokenness into beauty, weaving our disappointments into His perfect tapestry of grace. Just as He saw that creation was good, He sees the goodness and potential in us. Even when we cannot, our lives are not random, they are carefully orchestrated, designed for a purpose that exceeds our imagination. Genesis calls us to trust, to surrender our uncertainties to the One who turns darkness into light and chaos into order. In the hands of the divine artist, every brushstroke, every detail of our lives, is part of a masterpiece in the making. Even when we cannot yet see the final picture, we can rest assured that He is shaping something glorious, far beyond what we could ever conceive. God granted Adam and Eve the profound responsibility of stewardship, a sacred partnership between the divine and the mortal. As caretakers of His creation, they were entrusted not only with the physical earth but also with the call to nurture, protect, and cultivate. This partnership reveals a vital truth, that our lives are intricately linked to the gifts God has given us. The task of stewardship extends beyond the soil beneath our feet, it reaches into the relationships we build, the talents we possess, and the opportunities we are given. The question Genesis poses is as relevant now as it was then: what are we doing with the gardens entrusted to us? Are we tending the seeds of love, faith, and hope in our communities, ensuring they grow strong and bear fruit? Or are we turning a blind eye to the weeds of bitterness, apathy, and neglect that threaten to choke them? Every choice we make reflects how we value the blessings God has placed in our care. Stewardship calls for intentionality, a commitment to cultivate the good, prune away the harmful, and foster an environment where growth is possible. It invites us to see every gift, whether material or spiritual, as a reflection of God's provision, deserving of our respect and careful management. The relationships we nurture, the talents we develop, and the resources we use are all part of the gardens He has entrusted to our care. Genesis reminds us that we are not passive observers in the story of creation, we are active participants. Through faith and diligence, we are called to mirror God's care and creativity, bringing beauty and purpose to the spaces we inhabit. As we cultivate what He has given, we honor not only the gifts but also the giver, demonstrating our trust in His divine wisdom and provision. The fall of man in the Garden of Eden is a deeply poignant narrative, a story of choice, consequence, and the profound grace of God. Eve and Adam, faced with the allure of forbidden knowledge, made a decision that changed the course of humanity. Their choice to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil reflects the vulnerability of the human heart, easily swayed by doubt and deception. It is a sobering reminder of how temptation preys upon our desires and how our decisions can ripple far beyond what we imagine. Yet, even in the disobedience, God's mercy shone brightly. While judgment was inevitable, it was not without hope. In the midst of the fall, God spoke a promise, a glimmer of redemption through the seed of the woman. A prophecy fulfilled in Christ. This declaration foreshadowed the ultimate victory over sin and death, demonstrating that God's love and plans for humanity are greater than our failures. This act of grace teaches us that no failure is ever final when we turn back to God. The Garden of Eden, though marked by loss, also became the birthplace of redemption's promise. It shows us that even when we stray, God does not abandon us. Instead, He pursues us with unwavering love. His plans for our restoration remain steadfast, inviting us to rise from our mistakes and return to His embrace. In moments of weakness, when we falter and feel unworthy, this story reminds us of the enduring mercy of God. His love is not conditional upon our perfection but rooted in His desire to see us restored to Him. With repentance and faith, we can step into the grace that was promised from the very beginning, walking forward with the assurance that God's redemptive plan is always at work. Noah's story stands as a beacon of unshakable faith and unwavering obedience. In a world steeped in corruption and violence, where the ways of God were abandoned, Noah chose a different path. He walked with God, his life a contrast to the moral decay around him. His faithfulness caught the attention of the Creator, who entrusted him with a task of monumental importance, to build an ark that would preserve life in the face of impending judgment. Imagine the weight of this command. To construct a massive vessel in a time when rain, let alone a flood, was an unknown phenomenon must have seemed both absurd and impossible. Yet Noah obeyed without hesitation, demonstrating a trust in God that transcended human logic. He worked tirelessly, enduring likely ridicule and skepticism from those around him, but his faith never wavered. He believed in God's promise and acted accordingly, showing us that true faith is not merely belief, it is belief in action. Noah's obedience not only ensured the survival of his family but also preserved God's covenant with humanity. His faith became the bridge between a corrupted world and the renewal that followed the flood. Through his steadfastness, we see the profound truth that God rewards those who trust Him, even when His instructions seem beyond comprehension. Noah's story challenges us to reflect on our own faith. Are we willing to obey God's call, even when it defies our understanding? Are we prepared to stand firm in our convictions, even when the world doubts or mocks us? Noah reminds us that the path of faith is not always easy, but it is always purposeful. By remaining steadfast in the face of uncertainty, we align ourselves with the Creator's perfect plan, trusting that His promises will be fulfilled in ways we cannot yet see. The story of Abraham is a profound testament to the power of faith in the face of uncertainty. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland, his family, and all that was familiar, the command was clear but the destination unknown: go from your country, to the land I will show you. This divine call demanded immense courage, a step into the unknown with nothing but trust in the God who promised to guide him. Abraham's journey was far from easy. It was marked by trials that tested his faith at every turn. He wandered through foreign lands, faced famine, and endured the pain of unfulfilled promises. The wait for his son, Isaac, the child through whom God vowed to bless the nations, stretched on for decades. Yet through every challenge, Abraham clung to the certainty of God's word, even when the circumstances seemed impossible. What makes Abraham's story so inspiring is his unwavering trust in the promises of God. Despite the long delays and moments of doubt, he believed that God's timing was perfect and his plans infallible. When God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, the very child of promise, Abraham obeyed, trusting that God could raise his son even from death if necessary. Such faith speaks to the depths of his conviction that God is faithful to fulfill his word. Abraham's journey encourages us to trust in God's perfect timing, even when the path ahead is unclear. It challenges us to step out of our comfort zones, to leave behind what is familiar, and to walk forward in faith. Like Abraham, we may not always see the full picture, but we are called to believe that the one who holds the stars in place also holds our future securely in his hands. In his promises, we find strength, hope, and the courage to journey on. Perhaps the most profound and heart-wrenching moment in Genesis is when God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, the very child upon whom all of God's promises hinge. Isaac was not merely Abraham's son. He was the fulfillment of a lifelong promise, the embodiment of God's covenant to make Abraham the father of many nations. The weight of this test must have been unbearable, yet Abraham obeyed without hesitation, trusting God even when the commands seemed to contradict the promise. Abraham's journey to Mount Moriah is a poignant illustration of faith in action. Every step he took must have been filled with questions, yet his trust in God never wavered. The moment he lifted the knife to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham demonstrated a faith so deep that he believed God could raise his son from the dead if necessary. This willingness to surrender his most cherished blessing reveals a profound truth: true faith places trust in the giver above the gift. This act of surrender challenges us to examine our own faith. What are we holding onto so tightly that we fear placing it in God's hands? Abraham's story reminds us that when we let go of our fears and dreams and entrust them to God, we make room for his greater plans to unfold. It is in surrender that we discover the fullness of his provision, as Abraham did when God provided a ram in Isaac's place. In this story, God is revealed as both the provider and the promise keeper. The test of faith is not meant to take from us but to refine us, drawing us closer to the heart of God. It reminds us that even when the path ahead is unclear, we can trust in his goodness, knowing that his plans are always greater than our own. The story of Joseph is a profound testament to the unshakable sovereignty of God's plans. A reminder that no betrayal, hardship, or injustice can derail his purpose. Sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and left to languish in prison, Joseph faced trials that could have easily hardened his heart with bitterness or despair. Yet, through it all, Joseph remained steadfast, trusting in the unseen hand of God's providence. What makes Joseph's story so extraordinary is not just his resilience but his unwavering faith in the midst of suffering. Rather than succumb to the weight of betrayal and injustice, he chose to live faithfully, serving with integrity wherever he was placed, whether as a slave, a prisoner, or eventually as Pharaoh's right-hand man. Each step of his journey, though painful, was a part of God's greater plan, positioning Joseph to become the instrument of salvation for both his family and an entire nation during a time of devastating famine. Joseph's declaration to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good," is a powerful affirmation of the redemptive power of God's plans. It reveals a truth that transcends his story, that our trials, no matter how severe, are never wasted in God's hands. He is the master of turning pain into purpose, transforming our deepest wounds into the very platform from which his glory is revealed. Joseph's life challenges us to persevere through difficulties, trusting that God is at work even when we cannot see the outcome. It encourages us to let go of resentment, to forgive those who wrong us, and to cling to the hope that God's purpose will prevail. In the end, Joseph's story is not just about his rise to power but about the unyielding faithfulness of a God who brings beauty from ashes and triumph from trials. The stories in Genesis are far more than distant echoes from the past. They are vibrant, living lessons that speak directly into the challenges, fears, and hopes we face today. These timeless narratives remind us that our lives are part of a greater tapestry, woven together by the hand of a faithful and sovereign God. God is faithful, from the covenant with Abraham to the preservation of Noah's family. Genesis declares the enduring nature of God's promises. In every trial, whether it be the waiting years for Isaac or Joseph's journey from the pit to the palace, God remains steadfast. His faithfulness is unchanging, a foundation we can rely on when our own circumstances seem uncertain. We are reminded that God finishes what He starts. His word never fails. Obedience brings blessings. The lives of Noah and Abraham show us the power of walking in obedience to God's call, even when the path is unclear or fraught with difficulty. Their stories encourage us to trust Him fully, knowing that blessings follow obedience, not always in the way we expect but in ways that fulfill His perfect plan. Redemption is possible. The fall in the Garden of Eden could have marked the end, but instead, it became the beginning of God's plan for redemption. Through every failure, from Adam and Eve's disobedience to the broken relationships among brothers, God's grace shines brighter. He restores, renews, and redeems, proving that no failure is too great for His mercy. God's plans are sovereign. The chaos and uncertainty of life are no match for the sovereignty of God. From creation's order emerging out of formlessness to Joseph's rise from betrayal to triumph, Genesis reveals that God's purposes prevail. Even when we cannot see His hand, we can trust His heart, knowing that He works all things for good. These stories challenge us to deepen our trust in God, to walk by faith when the road ahead is unclear, and to hold on to the hope that His plans for us are good. Genesis invites us not only to remember these lessons but to live them, carrying their truths into our daily lives as beacons of faith, hope, and purpose. As we reflect on the lessons of Genesis, we are drawn into an invitation to draw closer to the Creator, a call to trust, to hope, and to walk by faith. The narratives of Genesis are not just ancient tales, they are mirrors of our own lives, reflecting the struggles, doubts, and triumphs that define our journey. Whether we are navigating the overwhelming waters of hardship, waiting in the silence of unanswered prayers, or stepping into the uncertainty of a new season, the stories of those who walked with God remind us that we are never alone. The God of Genesis is the same unchanging God who walks with us today. His love, power, and faithfulness remain constant, anchoring us in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. Just as He declared His creation very good, He sees the inherent beauty, value, and potential within each of us. We are not accidents or afterthoughts, we are purposefully and lovingly made, designed to reflect His glory in our unique ways. These stories encourage us to see challenges not as insurmountable obstacles but as opportunities to deepen our faith. The flood that seemed like destruction became a new beginning for Noah. The delay in God's promise to Abraham brought a greater testimony of His faithfulness. The betrayal Joseph endured prepared him to save nations. Each trial was not the end of the story but a chapter in God's redemptive plan. In our own lives, Genesis calls us to trust that the same God who brought light to the darkness and order to chaos is actively at work. He invites us to step forward with confidence, to embrace His promises, and to live in the assurance that we are part of His eternal story, a story marked by love, grace, and the unwavering hope of His presence. Let us walk in faith, trusting that the same God who brought light to darkness and order to chaos is working in our lives. No matter where we are on our journey, His promises are sure, and His plans are perfect.